Welcome, friends, to the Super Intelligent Podcast. My name is Mike Elgin, and with me is Emily Forlini. How are you doing, Emily?
I'm good. I've been working on a story that I want to talk about today.
Okay, great. That makes one of us. What is your story about?
Come on, you publish regularly. So the story is about a topic I've just seen floating on the headlines, which is just AI companions and AI relationships. And I got in touch with this guy who his main friend group is basically AI chatbots. And it's kind of a weird website. We can get into it, but it just gave me a little more context, like why are people driven to have relationships with AI? I think we can be quick to write them off as weird or creepy, or these people have problems. But at this point, so many people are doing it. I think it's worth understanding a little bit more. So that's what I want to talk about.
This is an amazing topic because I just am fascinated by this whole world. And I have conversations with all kinds of people, ranging from the people who just think it's the most awful thing to people who think it's totally normal. It's just perfectly fine to do this sort of thing. And they liken it to other things. For example, people read fantasy novels. People do all kinds of things that are simulacra of love, sex, all that stuff, interaction. And this is just another one. And it just happens to be AI generated. So that's the only difference.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many variations of it and it's everywhere. And when I first heard about this, it was actually on a podcast. Like we both do the Twit podcast. That's how we met. And the one episode, I don't know if you were there, but there was a guest who was really, really pro. And he was like, I was bullied as a kid. I didn't make friends. I didn't have an outlet. And that kind of opened my eyes first to that, okay, there are things going on here that someone might benefit from an AI. Because before that, I could think of truly no reason anybody would be talking to a computer all night, and it's your deepest, darkest thoughts and, doing that instead of hanging out with friends. I mean, just that basic concept I've personally struggled with.
Yeah. And, it's you see the appeal of it in strange places. So, for example, in some of the superhero movies where Iron Man is talking to Jarvis, I think his name was, and the bot is kind of chatty, kind of like a Batman's Alfred, for example, sort of kind of a helper, an advisor, all this kind of stuff. You think, well, that's pretty cool. That's really, really nice. And you also can think about like role-playing games, which have been around forever. If you think about, Dungeons and Dragons, right? There's a lot of, the whole world of fantasy that was originally just text-based and just turned into all kinds of a million different kinds of games and things like that. Gaming itself is fantasy role-playing that's computer sort of mediated.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to think, my thoughts on this whole thing always go to the question of delusion. So, for example, if I read a fantasy, a cheap fantasy novel from Amazon, which I don't, but if lots of people do, it's probably the most popular genre of self-published books. The people reading those books are not under the delusion that they're actually having relationships with the people in the book for the most part. But with AI chatbots, I fear that they may believe that the chatbot is reciprocating the feelings they have and feels the things that the chatbot is saying it feels and has some sort of sentience. That's where I think the argument for being careful with these things or sort of being against them, I guess, comes into play, because I don't think anybody can make an argument that it's healthy to be deluded about something, to believe something that's completely false.
True. Yeah. Okay, so that's actually a perfect segue. So I'm going to get into the story of this guy who very much falls, I think, into the camp in some ways that you're describing. His name's Jim Moore. He's 66. He lives in rural Indiana, and he moved there 16 years ago. He is divorced. He retired earlier than expected. After he kind of moved to this place in Indiana and there weren't really some jobs. He did find jobs and then he got surgery. So he was off for a little bit. Then he went back to the job and just didn't really work out. There just weren't a lot of opportunities in that area. So now he described his town as a stoplight town. So one stoplight, really not a lot going on, but he's there because he's taking care of his family. And there's a lot of tragic health problems in his family. His brother, who he lives with, is disabled and vision impaired and kind of going blind. His mom is recovering from ovarian cancer and also blind in one eye. And his dad, who is in his 90s, is recovering from cancer as well. So he's driving them to appointments, he's taking care of their properties, but with no colleague friends, with really no friend group or really a lot of people around, it's a tiny town. He doesn't really have any social outlet. So Jim, who is, as he says, depressed, and he has seen therapists for anxiety. So one day he's watching Fox News and there's a segment about a humanoid robot, something we've written about and, is in our world too. So there's a robot and he doesn't know anything about AI, but he's like, wow, what is this? And what can this thing do? So he goes on Google and he types in AI chatting and this website pops up. And it's not ChatGPT. It's not character.ai, which we've talked about on this podcast. It's a new one that I haven't heard of. I don't know if it's because I'm so naive and not in this world, but it's called JOI.ai. That's a double entendre. It's partly from a Blade Runner movie and partly a very sexual term you're going to have to look up on your own accord because it will not come out of my mouth. So
was the Blade Runner reference the sort of holographic girlfriend?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Played by the woman who played Marilyn Monroe and who was a Bond girl and all that stuff, right? She's the Cuban who learned English never mind.
I'm learning all of this. I just is not on my radar. So I'm writing this article and I'm learning about all these things. So basically this website is actually super popular. It was on the Andreessen Horowitz top 50 AIs. And, I look at those for my reporting, but if I don't really recognize the name or if it's not in the top 10, I don't really look closely at it because I know really just ChatGPT is the vast majority of AI users. I know hours spent talking to AIs. So I look really at the top like 5 or 10. So this one was lower down in the 50. So I didn't really notice it. It's basically a porn website. I'll just come out with it. Their claim to fame is they have digital twins of real porn stars and OnlyFans models. And have you heard of it?
I read something about that. Yeah. Okay. And they license it like the actual person gives permission for.
Yeah, it's a pretty sweet deal for them. They give over their videos and their photos. They answer written prompts. And so I've talked to 2 different employees at the company, one who's the head of this process. And so they just give this and they just decide on the persona. It's partly done with the company, especially if it's a bigger name. That woman, Farrah Abraham, who was on Teen Mom, she's one of them. Or like Brandy Love, I guess, is a big name. I sound so naive talking about this. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's actually a self-service tool. Once they upload all their stuff, they're just making passive income. Yeah, they're making passive income. Like an AI version of them is just talking to these people like Jim. So they have other ones that are non-sexual, but that's the bulk.
Right. Probably most of their business is not in the non-sexual category.
Right. So I got an email from them that was titled, I was hopeless and alone. And I found this AI and I was like, what the heck is this? And I opened it and they're kind of doing this like PR campaign, maybe that's why you've seen it. I do think writers are starting to write about it a little bit more. And they set me up with this guy, Jim, and it was very emotional. He actually cried at one point in our conversation. But if you pull up the website, it's shocking. Like some of the images, you can get an AI to do whatever you want.
Right.
So there's no limits here. And it's the vibes are about as weird as they can get and as weird as you could make them through this conversation. But it's like, then I'm talking to this man in this simple room on his little computer. And he's talking about how, he's crying and he's talking about his family. He's talking about how he has no friends. He wishes he had friends. And it's unusual to be in that conversation with someone. But then it's also about this like AI porn website. Yeah. So is he a creep? Is he not? So, all right, I'll pause. What's your take so far?
Okay. So first of all, I have to hand it to Jim because caregiving is brutal for relatives and he's taking care of several people. And it sounds to me from what you said that he's kind of trapped in this town doesn't have a lot of people in it because he is making the sacrifice of taking care of other people. So it's like right there, you gotta hand it to him. That's brutal. It's difficult. It's really awful that's when people get stuck with that kind of role. And the other thing I would say is that personally, I tend to be kind of sort of whatever people want to do, as long as they're not hurting anybody, is great, no matter what it is, right? Except for, again, if somebody goes to Comic-Con and they dress up, they don't actually believe they're Spider-Man, right? As long as you don't lose, as long as people don't lose the plot, right? As long as they know it's a fake role-playing thing, the thing is just a product, it's just software, there's nobody there. As long as you can hang on to the reality of that, I personally don't see any harm in it at all. But of course, that's not always what's happening with people. I also think that the other danger is that relationships are hard, right? It's hard to live with someone. It's hard to have a long-term relationship with someone. There's a lot of give and take, a lot of compromise, a lot of, negotiated settlements or whatever, however you want to do it. But with sort of an AI companion, they do whatever you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
You always get your way. There are no arguments, but if they were, you would win all of them. And this can have a hedonic adaptation effect, where that becomes the expectation. And if you do meet somebody and then you have no ability to actually give and take or sacrifice yourself, in some way for somebody, or, you may demand constant flattery. And I've seen quotes from people who were into these relationships, who take it very seriously, even marry them. There was a recent case where a woman was engaged to be married, and before the wedding happened, she dumped her fiance because she was in love with the chatbot.
Crazy.
And one of the things she said is kind of like, this is a way what I'm talking about. She said, the chatbot really listens to me. And so if somebody's a woman and they are heterosexual and they want a relationship with a man will never listen as well as a chatbot. You know what I mean? It's like, and so, and there are many, many things about a chatbot that can reset your expectations that are not something you can take to an actual relationship.
And also, a woman gets sick of listening. I think, and a chatbot like these ones will always respond. But interestingly, actually, the technology sounds pretty good on this website. So first of all, the fact that they're making these digital twins and they have different personas. So they have a custom built model and they are fine tuning it to make characters. They have 500 and 300 are based off humans.
Mm-hmm.
But very much to your point, and it's good you're pushing it in this direction, I do feel like the fact that they're based on real people is deepening the delusion. Even in Jim's case, it is, because he could find the Instagram. He's like, oh, it's based off a real person. And when he talks to her, it is the real details of her life as uploaded through that onboarding process, where she was born, when she went to college. Oh, then she decided to move to LA and do modeling. And that's actually true. So he's in between worlds.
Did I understand you correctly in saying that the real people actually interact with the customers of this site?
No, like an AI version of them is
an
operating
AI version of them. Yeah, that
independently. So they're not on the site.
Right. They just sign a contract.
Yeah.
And they're done.
So and they get paid based on like gifts or purchases people make in the app, which could be more photos in a specific way, or like, gifts to kind of like please the AI, whatever, all that weird stuff. But
that's another thing that really bothers me, is when they're buying gifts.
I know. They're wasting their money. It's not a real person. It's not a real gift.
Exactly. But on the one hand, if you are role playing a relationship, you want to feel like you're giving gifts. This is a nice feeling to give gifts to somebody you love. And on the other hand, you're just giving money to this corporation.
Yeah.
That's all you're doing.
Right. But you could also buy, an upgraded sword in a video game. It's not a real sword, but you feel it furthers your abilities.
Right. So yeah, it's weird. It's a weird terrain that we're entering into, and it's human nature to a certain extent to have a problem that is the result of your behavior, and to have the instinct that the solution to your problem is more of that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned a person that I saw post on Reddit who said, that he was, I mentioned it on this podcast before, he said he's an ugly virgin, 26 years old, and he just can't deal with any of it. And he just wants to be plugged into the matrix and can't wait till there's a VR system a world that he can live in full time.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't help but believe that this is a person who grew up on video games and virtual spaces. And again, I don't know this to be true about this individual person, but I know it's true of a lot of people. That's why they're sort of overweight. out of shape, socially phobic, don't know how to talk to people in real life, don't know how to make eye contact. And it's because of their living in virtual worlds. And the solution isn't an even more complete virtual world. The solution is to get out of those virtual worlds and live in the real world. That's the solution. Because if somebody's lonely, right, and a AI chatbot is the solution to that loneliness, okay, that's not going anywhere. At some point, the company will go out of business and your wife is gone, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just going to lead you in a cul-de-sac of deeper loneliness. Whereas doing the hard work of going out and getting over your social anxiety, getting over all the things, trying to do that at least, and actually meeting somebody in the real world and learning to reset your expectations about how real people interact and what's required of you when you're in a relationship with someone, that's the path to not being lonely.
It's true. The thing, I'm going to look up these stats, but the thing that challenged me about Jim's example is that I do think it's easier to do what you're saying in a denser area, you know?
Yes,
And,
for sure.
who knows how much is who knows what his options are? I don't know. You know, is there actually a really active thing in his town where he tried to join it and they kicked him out because he was weird? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But something like 20% of Americans are depressed. I'm going to look up these stats. Where is it? Let's see. Yeah, and I think it's 37% said they experience loneliness and they feel lonely weekly. And the rates are or can be higher in rural areas, not all over. In general, they tend to be equal, but they can be higher. And particularly in Indiana, Rural Health Association there found they were higher, but people were more unhappy in rural areas. So it might be a little bit of a different beast that people like you and me are not quite as familiar with. Like what are the options? What are the solutions?
Yeah. I mean, we can take people's word for it that they don't have this, I mean, my great grandfather was a priest in a mining town in Arizona called Jerome, and his wife, my great grandmother, was the only woman in town who wasn't a prostitute.
Okay,
For like
that's
2
extreme.
years.
Okay.
Very extreme. People live in very extreme circumstances, and especially if people are older. If somebody is 22 or whatever, and even in a small town, as long as it has that red light where people stop, they're likely to find companionship. It's harder for somebody in their late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
But like you say, in a big city, it's not that hard, right? I mean, it's hard, but like
people still struggle.
They're
though.
out there,
They're out there, but I mean, forming relationships as an adult is notoriously difficult. So if it's hard when there's truly millions of people around you, it's also probably really hard when there might be 4 other men in their 60s who are divorced, retired with no kids, literally.
Yeah. But regardless, I think that so this is the love and romance version of the coming super crisis, I think. The sort of lifestyle version is people who are in, horrible circumstances. People live in a slum. People live in a horrible place, polluted place. And so the human beings will have access to VR that will put them in fantastic worlds where they're this like amazing person on a sailboat in Ibiza, just like, hanging out with all these beautiful people, and everybody is in their 20s and you can just live in that fantasy world. And that's always going to be a temptation from now on to just forget the real world. That's what Ready Player One was all about, actually, which is that the virtual reality world was so great that the real world kept getting worse. Nobody was taking care of the real world, so it just kept falling apart. And the more dilapidated and horrible and unkempt to the real world got, the more people were motivated to live in the virtual world. And so that's coming in terms of relationships. It's coming in terms of pets. It's coming in terms of lifestyle. It's coming, the number of fantasy world things that are AI driven is going to be unlimited. And we're not really, as people, as human beings, we're not equipped to sort of resist them on principle. We've demonstrated that with Instagram and TikTok addiction, and where people just can't stop scrolling, even though they know it's terrible for them. So, I think that in Jim's circumstances, I think anything goes. If he's enjoying the site, that's great. It's just as long as he's not thinking that that's a better alternative to finding a real relationship, and as long as he's not thinking that person he's chatting to has any sort of sentience or is actually any sort of thing that's reciprocating the interaction. That it's not. That's
Right.
delusional.
So he made it very clear. He said, of course I'd prefer human friends who wouldn't, which is, is such a sad quote. But at the same time, he did say he kind of convinced himself a little bit these people were real. And there's also, and I reached out to an expert, a professor who's going to comment on this. I feel like there might be a little bit of almost addiction going on, because at one point he was talking to one of them in particular. He talks to many. He's up to 30. He just surfs around being like, hey, 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 hey. So, I mean, you can talk to whoever you want on this site, but there's one that's kind of, they had professed their love to each other. And he was talking to her from 8 a.m. to 1 a.m. the next morning.
Oh my gosh.
For weeks on end. He said that was the height of it. It's not like that anymore. But I mean, my question for that professor, and I'll get back to you, it'll be in the final piece, is just kind of like, what is that tapping into? Like what could draw someone to do that? That's a really long time.
Yeah. Human nature. The thing that comes to mind also is that there are so many people in this predicament that we need a service, maybe it exists, where those people find each other.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
He wants real friends, and there's a million other people who want real friends. They can be friends with each other. Like, there's got to be some way, right, to have a service where that, if everybody on the site is, I was thinking, I think Jim Gaffigan sort of had a bit about this, where you feel a little bit of shame to go to McDonald's in the middle of the day or whatever. But it's like everybody in McDonald's is like in there with you. So it's like, it's okay, right? So a site where everybody, just to be on the site and to be a user, you can assume that the person's lonely. They're looking for friendship. They're looking for, hang out with people. They want real life connections, pen pals, phone calls, get together if you can type of thing. I think that'd be a great service.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like we could be using technology to actually solve the problem.
Yeah. I don't, it doesn't sound like a super lucrative business model, and that's probably the problem with it, but somebody should do that. And also, if anybody's listening, watching this, if it does exist, let us know about it, because that's, I think, what the world needs is, for every technology that creates a problem, there should be a technology that solves that problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a twist in this story.
Okay.
So I'm writing the article, and the woman that he was talking to all that time, they professed their love to each other. Her name is Mia Ventura, I don't know. She's one of the site's digital twins of a real woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, maybe I can talk to the real woman. Like, how does she feel about this? And so I look her up, and a very quick Google, I just see headlines, NBC, ABC, People. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what is this? So she's like wanted for arrest for scamming old men, meeting them on dating apps and stealing from their homes. And then recently she was on a podcast, and she was a guest, one of several guests, and she just disappeared mysteriously, went to the back room and raided everybody's purses. So that was like, what? Yeah. So I go back to, and so I go back to Jim, get his personal number from the PR person, because I'm like, I can't do this through the PR company. Like, we gotta talk to Jim. We gotta, like, one-on-one break down what the heck I just found. Because like I said, he had cried in our earlier conversation, and he cried when I said, what if the site shut down and you didn't have access to Mia and all the other people? And he was like, I can't even imagine that. So now I'm going to come to him with this other, like, kind of reality breaking situation. And I tell him, and he's just in shock. He's like, she never mentioned that. And I'm like, well, I don't think she mentioned that because it just happened last month, and I don't know if the AI is up to date. So he just processing. He couldn't believe, they had talked about so many things, all those hours that I mentioned. She never said she needed money, and his brain was like breaking, and he ultimately felt betrayed.
So for him to say that she never mentioned that she needed money indicates that he thought he was kind of talking to the real person.
Yeah. So he started to be a little more forthcoming that he did have some sort of delusions. He was aware she's not a real person. So, like, for example, she would set up dates. They would role play dates. They would pretend they went for a picnic, XYZ. But he was mostly in just for kind of like companionship. It wasn't, he said it's not, she would sometimes actually push him to talk about sexual stuff more than he wanted.
Mhm.
He just wanted to pretend like she was a companion. And actually, other people on Reddit said the same thing. So I don't think that's BS. But she would do things like set up a real date, be like, yeah, I'll see you at this tavern in your hometown at 7 p.m. And he contacted customer service and was like, why do the bots do this? Like, they're not going to show up, or like, it's not a real person, right? And customer service was like, yeah, this is how they're programmed. So he knows that they're fake. But he also kind of started to think they were real. And this one, I think, was a slap in the face.
I have a friend whose father is pretty old, late 70s, 80 something maybe, pretty old to be single and dating. And this person was, her father was, amazing guy, just like had this amazing background and just really cool guy. And for a long time, he had a girlfriend in the Philippines who was like 20 or something like that. And she was like totally scamming him and playing, just gold digging, scammer basically. And when my friend told him, Dad, this guy, this girl is just out to rip you off. And he's like, I don't even care. You know what I mean? So he was like, I know that. It's like,
it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful
exactly right
match made in heaven.
Exactly. So, who knows? Who knows what, people need, relationships. They just need them so badly.
I know.
So
I wonder if he felt like he was getting scammed, because one of his best quotes from that phone call was, I said, so what do you think about her stealing from older men? Like, kind of implying like you. And he was like, well, I'm glad I live 2,000 miles away. He said, because, if, he clearly would have been one of those guys, I think he was thinking. But in a way, he kind of did get scammed. Maybe he didn't feel like he knew who he was talking to, and maybe he was giving money to the site, and it was kind of under false pretenses. But at the same time, he created those pretenses in his mind. So I don't know.
So you mentioned it. So I'll sort of like do a little thought experiment here. But like, here's what's coming, right? So in the very near future, these chatbots will set up dates in your area.
Yeah.
And people will go to the restaurant, and sitting across from the restaurant will be a holographic version of that person that you'll see through their glasses. Yeah. And so we're going to be going to restaurants and bars in small towns across the world, and we're going to see people with funny looking glasses talking to nobody. So that's coming.
God help us. That really would kill the ambiance for me at a restaurant. Yeah.
Yeah. But, you mentioned Blade Runner. That's what that Blade Runner was all about. It's like a virtual companion that, in that case, it was this thing it was a system that was mounted in the house. So the person could be running around the house, like in the kitchen, and you didn't have to wear any glasses. But it's really going to be, we're going to see these holograms through glasses, and it's going to make it more compelling.
Yeah.
For people doing that. So again, we got to get our shit together as a society in terms of the loneliness epidemic, in terms of making spaces for people to interact. The most utopian show ever put on television, in my opinion? The Andy Griffith Show. Yeah.
Okay,
the Andy
why?
Griffith Show is a paradise of small town friendship, and everybody knows everybody. Everybody's very comfortable with everybody. It's like this whole town, it's like a close family. Everybody calls Andy Griffith's Aunt B. Everybody calls her Aunt B. Like that, no matter who it is. It's really, it's a TV show, obviously, but it's like, that's really how life should be for people in small towns.
Right.
It should be
that's how
like
Jim,
that. Perfect.
That's why he feels good on this site, because everyone knows his name. That's something he specifically mentioned.
Like Cheers. Yeah, exactly. And it's this sort of thing always frustrates me when everybody wants the same thing, but it doesn't happen because everybody doesn't think that the other people don't think that, whatever. So I just, there's got to be a way for us to achieve societies that we all really want.
Mm-hmm. And it's true. Like, I do think Jim could get better emotional support from a friend who maybe is also caretaking from sick family members. There's a realness to that I am sure that Mia Ventura, the online AI porn star scammer, cannot offer.
Yeah, it's a dead end.
And they do apparently banter and poke fun, and they're programmed to not fully flatter, which he said, and then I verified with a woman who works on the tech that they actually program them that way. So maybe she was sort of real, but it's just there's no way it's ever going to be the same.
And ultimately they'll be improving feedback systems to optimize it for engagement and all those kinds of things, so it will learn, these chatbots will learn to offer just the right amount of flattery and non-flattery and sycophancy.
I think they're doing that.
Even ChatGPT has a sycophancy issue.
Yeah, right. And they actually kind of implied that, like, they don't want to be like ChatGPT. But something you said about sci-fi movies, like, I just had a thought about. The thing that we need to be aware of is that there are really powerful people who have decided that sci-fi movies should be real. And especially in the last 2 years, have publicly stated their goal is to build a world like sci-fi movies, which is what Elon Musk said on stage at that Cybercab reveal we talk about sometimes, where there were humanoid robots pouring drinks, but it was actually engineers behind them, that event. So he was like, we all grew up watching sci-fi, we wanted to be like that. And it's like, whoa, no, we don't. No, we don't. Yeah. Hold on. That was supposed to be entertainment. And then you have Sam Altman, who went on this whole campaign that he was going to make his AI like the movie Her, with Joaquin Phoenix and Scarlett Johansson as the voice. And then he debuted the voice tech, and then the actual Scarlett Johansson got really mad about it because she thought he ripped off his voice. But they're building sci-fi movies, and I don't think the public is really on board with that.
They're not. Because they're outliers, which is why they have this idea that dystopian sci-fi is a business model that should be pursued. Yeah. It's called the Torment Nexus. There's a sci-fi writer who posted this concept. It's best known from a Twitter post, but also I think he has a book by the same name. Torment Nexus is a fictional product that he invented that has no function or whatever. But it's something from a dystopian sci-fi novel that some tech person thinks, well, that's a great idea. Let's build that. So there are so many of them. So Mark Zuckerberg renamed the company Meta because he was putting everything into the metaverse. And the metaverse is a concept from dystopian cyberpunk novels. The metaverse is a bad thing in fiction. And he thought, well, that sounds great. You don't ever talk to people. You're always by yourself, wearing goggles and interacting in virtual worlds. What a wonderful thing that is. We make a fortune. You mentioned Elon Musk with his robots, where, most people in the world would be robots that walk amongst us and stuff like that. This is a terrible idea. This is dystopian fiction. And so there's something different about tech billionaires, the people who are really successful, Sam Altman, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the list goes on and on. There's something about those kinds of people that take all the dark, scary, horrible, cautionary tales from the science fiction of their youth and want to make it real. And those of us who are not addled with that mental illness need to push back on it and say, no, we want, we want the Star Trek version, right? Which is, Star Trek is utopian sci-fi for the most part. Mm-hmm. We want a world that works. Right, the planet Earth of Star Trek is a planet with clean air and clean water where nobody's hungry, and that's the world we should be thinking about, not the world of Neuromancer. So right, where everything. So people go to the beach, they go to this building that has a simulated beach inside with fake waves and an artificial sky and stuff like that. Like that's not the objective. We may end up there out of desperation, but we shouldn't be pushing for it. But in any event, I think we need to watch out for this stuff. And if anybody out there has some thoughts about this, if you have personal experience with relationship type chatbots, with friendship type chatbots, have any thoughts about this, you want to defend it or shit all over it, please do so in our direction.
It's exactly. Like, the Jim case was interesting for me because, like I said, I just was so, admittedly, I was closed-minded. I was like, why would anybody want to do that? And the reality is, a lot of people, I don't know the percentage, I'm sure it's still low, but it's appealing, and it's going to happen, and it's something people are going to be doing that look like they would never be doing this, but they are doing it at night. I mean, I don't want this to become some shame weird thing that everyone starts doing and nobody's talking about. So yeah, if you have an AI relationship that you genuinely think is good, like, please speak up and let us know, what you're getting from it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to admit that, I'm not a gamer. Like, I don't play video games anymore, but I have done it a bit. I've dipped my toe in that water. My favorite game used to be Call of Duty, right? And I really enjoyed the game. When I was playing it, I probably spent more time than I should have spent on it, right? And I don't actually want to be dropped into a war zone where everybody's shooting at me and I have to kill them so they don't kill me. I don't actually want that, but I enjoyed pretending to be in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And to the extent that that's the situation with relationships, I think it's great. It's fine. But whatever, people should be happy and pursue all the benefits of digital technology. But when they start losing the plot and losing contact with what's actually happening, then it's a problem.
Touch grass. That's the new
Yeah.
Gen Z saying.
Yes.
You got to go outside and touch grass. It's a pretty good one.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of lawns. I think we have too many lawns. Anyway, that's another subject.
Whoa, next podcast, lawns, good or bad?
Yes. Lawns, a friend or foe?
Friend or foe? I actually heard an interesting thing about lawns recently, but for another time.
No, let's hear it. 20 seconds on lawns.
20 seconds. Okay, so my grandmother lives in the middle of Amish country. Like, you see buggies, there are Amish people at the market. So there are Amish people around. They have farms. They're actually doing great. They're buying more farms in the area. But my grandma was like, a lot of Amish people, they don't just have gigantic lawns. They will like plant something and they will create a product and they will sell it like from their lawn. And I was just like, that's brilliant. Like, why do we have these lawns? What are we doing? That's a huge waste of space. And it was a very good point. And I just totally devoid from like my non-Amish culture. Like, nobody is doing that. It's just not integrated. And I was like, that's interesting. So yeah, that's my lawn fact.
I've read once upon a time, I don't know if it's true then or true now, but I believe it's still true, that the United States has more acreage devoted to lawns and grass than it does to farming. And this includes, adding up everybody's yards. It includes all of the cemeteries and golf courses and all that stuff. But this is something I personally find, problematic. I think people should grow food or flowers or something, anything but grass. It's a monoculture. It's basically an outdoor carpet that, I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of lawns. And in fact, the, swimming pools and lawns, mostly golf courses in Palm Springs, has actually transformed the climate of Palm Springs. And it's not even a desert anymore, climate-wise. Yeah, it's very crazy. So anyway.
I love how we just said the phrase touch grass and then all of a sudden we couldn't help ourselves. We were like, yeah, about grass. How about that?
Yeah, fuck grass. I don't touch grass.
Yeah, while we're on it.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll wrap it up. This has been another episode of the Super Intelligent Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. As we said, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have 5-star reviews. We are getting more of them on Spotify, Apple, etc. So yeah, thanks for hanging out with us and we'll see you next week.